Imagine waking up each morning, not knowing if you'll find enough food to eat or what you'll have to sell, perhaps even illegally, just to make it through the day. In Cuba, this is the stark reality many face daily. Women must think hard to maintain their beauty when something as simple as hair dye can cost a significant chunk of their monthly income and is often only found on the black market. The streets are filled with people selling anything they can, turning survival into a daily hustle. And when a stranger offers to exchange your money, you must ask yourself, who can you really trust? Welcome to Cuba, a land of contrasts where vintage cars and crumbling colonial architecture meet a complex web of economic challenges and human resilience. Please subscribe to support us to explore these questions. Much appreciated. Thank you. Cuba, an island nation in the Caribbean, is rich in history, culture, and contradictions. Known for its stunning beaches, charming streets lined with vintage cars, and welcoming people, Cuba presents a facade that often masks a more complex reality. For tourists, Cuba can feel like a paradise frozen in time, where you can sip mojitos on the shores of Varadero or stroll the streets of Havana. The vintage cars, colorful buildings, and salsa music create a nostalgic atmosphere that beckons those curious to experience a culture shaped by decades of a unique political system. However, what most visitors don't see is the daily life of Cubans. The reality beneath the surface is one of struggle, sacrifice, and restraint. It's a life far removed from the freedom and ease most people are used to in other countries. For Cubans, survival often means overcoming shortages, navigating government restrictions, and dealing with a lack of basic necessities. While tourists enjoy all-inclusive resorts and carefully curated experiences, Cubans live a parallel life where food is rationed, dissent carries risks, and opportunities are scarce. This dichotomy between the tourist experience and local reality is a defining characteristic of modern Cuba. One of the most striking aspects of daily life in Cuba is the prevalence of long lines and scarcity of goods. This isn't just about waiting for your morning coffee. It's about queuing for hours to obtain essential items. In La Victoria neighborhood in Havana, you'll find Plaza de Carlos III, one of the city's largest shopping centers. From the outside, you might expect a bustling mall experience, but what you'll actually see is very different. Long lines of people sit patiently, sometimes stretching around the corner, all waiting for their chance to enter the store. These people are waiting their turn to buy the most basic necessities, food, and personal hygiene products. In a country where scarcity is a daily reality, accessing essentials isn't as simple as walking into a store. It requires a significant sacrifice of time and patience. Some days, Cubans spend entire mornings in these queues with no guarantee that what they need will still be available when they reach the front of the line. Waiting for hours without complaining is a testament to their strength and adaptability. This may be foreign to many of us, especially those from places where you can get anything at the click of a button. Scarcity affects every aspect of life in Cuba, from social interactions to the pace of life and even dating culture. Imagine planning a date, but first having to queue for basic necessities before you can even think about impressing someone. In this context, time becomes a valuable currency. For those who live here, this is just part of life. In places like Havana, where resources can be scarce, patience is not only a virtue, but a survival skill. When exploring Cuba, one thing you'll quickly notice is the constant hustle of Cubans. It's not just a side hustle or a way to make some extra cash. It's often a necessity in a country where market shortages define daily life. You won't find aisles filled with everything you need in government-run stores. Instead, most goods are in limited supply, and availability can change from week to week. This scarcity has given rise to an entire underground economy where people sell whatever they can afford. It's not uncommon to see someone sitting on their porch reselling products they've bought from government stores or goods that relatives have brought back from abroad. These informal markets are an essential part of life. Cubans often rely on these smaller local vendors to buy essentials that can't always be obtained through official channels. You might walk down the street and see a woman selling laundry detergent she bought in bulk at a store, or a man selling imported clothes he managed to get from a relative living abroad. At first, it may be surprising to see people selling from their homes or on the street, but you'll soon realize that it's just part of the way things work. Someone's porch becomes a mini supermarket, and conversations about where to find certain products become a normal part of everyday life. This system fosters a sense of community and resourcefulness among Cubans. It's not just about buying and selling, it's about connection, trust, and the daily grind that keeps life running smoothly in a place where scarcity is the norm. The underground economy, while technically illegal, is often tolerated by authorities as it fills crucial gaps in the official supply chain. For many Cuban women, beauty is more than just vanity. It is part of their identity. Cuban culture places a high value on appearance, and women take pride in maintaining their beauty. However, in a country where basic goods are often hard to come by, staying fashionable and well-groomed is no easy task. Something as common as hair dye, which might be considered cheap elsewhere, can cost up to a third of the average monthly salary in Cuba. This is a huge expense when you consider what many people have to do to make a living on their limited incomes. Luxury products such as makeup or skincare often cost much more than Cubans can afford. Cuban women have to be resourceful, creative, and patient. They might save up for months to buy a product, or rely on informal networks to source essential beauty items. Yet despite these challenges, Cuban women often manage to look gorgeous and well-groomed. Their ability to maintain their appearance in the face of such obstacles is a testament to their ingenuity and determination. The reality is that most Cuban women, like many others, rely on relatives living abroad to send them money or goods. Without this support, even basic necessities, let alone luxury items, become nearly impossible to obtain. Families with members living in the United States, Europe, or Latin America often rely on them to send much-needed supplies, from food and clothing to beauty products and medicine. For women, this dependence often means juggling multiple responsibilities. They manage the household, care for children, and ensure their families have what they need, all while relying on remittances from relatives. In many cases, Cuban women are the breadwinners of their families, using every resource they have to maintain not only appearances, but also the family's well-being. This resourcefulness in the face of challenges shapes their identity and everyday lives. It's a reflection of the broader Cuban spirit of perseverance and adaptability in the face of ongoing economic hardships. One topic that resonates deeply with parents across Cuba is feeding their children, particularly when it comes to school meals. Children's nutrition is a constant concern for parents, as the government's ability to provide adequate and nutritious food has been stretched for decades. Even when parents sacrifice giving up their own food to ensure their children have enough to eat, the situation remains complicated and often heartbreaking. A typical school meal in Cuba might consist of something as simple as bread with corn tortillas. A far cry from the balanced meals that many families in other countries might take for granted. Even this basic food is becoming harder to come by. The price of food items like eggs, which are typically a simple and affordable source of protein, has skyrocketed to levels that are almost unimaginable for a Cuban family. A carton of eggs can cost between 3,000 and 3,500 pesos, or about $10 to $12. To put that in perspective, that's nearly a month's salary for many Cubans. This stark reality forces families to make difficult choices about how to allocate their limited resources, often prioritizing their children's needs over their own. In Cuba, where scarcity and economic challenges have shaped society for decades, the prices of basic goods paint a picture of the hardships people endure. When you walk into a Cuban market, something as simple as a pound of pork can cost more than 1,000 pesos. At first, this may seem shocking, especially when you consider that 1,000 pesos is a significant portion of the average Cuban's monthly income. Such high prices force people to make difficult choices. Many opt for cheaper processed meats like ground pork or other alternatives just to save a little more. It's not uncommon to see people selling everyday items like plastic bags or homemade goods just to save enough money to buy a few pounds of meat. The scarcity of basic foods like pork, flour, and bread reflects a larger problem: the difficulty of obtaining even the most basic items. Take bread, a staple in many Cuban households. The bread you see in stores today often comes from what are called bodegas, a government-run food rationing system. But even that bread is in short supply. There have been times when the weight of bread has been reduced simply because there wasn't enough flour to go around. In some parts of Cuba, people wake up at 3 or 4 in the morning just to buy a loaf of bread. Long before the sun rises, people line up at bakeries, hoping to get a limited supply of bread. This isn't just an occasional inconvenience. It's a daily reality for many families. Despite all this, Cubans remain incredibly resilient. Whether they're waiting in line for bread or eating whatever processed meat they can find, they understand that they're all in the same boat. This shared experience of hardship has fostered a sense of community and mutual support among Cubans. For many Cubans, the day begins with one main goal: finding food. It's not as simple as walking to the nearest supermarket. Instead, it's a daily task that requires perseverance and often a little luck. They wake up with a list of tasks that are not about growth or personal development, but simply getting through another day. The search for food starts early, and there are no guarantees. Prices are high, supplies are low, and most goods are out of reach for those without extra help. When local options run out, many Cubans turn to family or friends abroad for help. Remittances, money sent from Cubans living in places like the United States or Europe, play a crucial role in many families' survival. Stores known as MLC, Moneda Libremente Convertible. Shops, where prices are sky high, rely heavily on this support from abroad. But for most Cubans, these prices are from another planet, making them dependent on their overseas relatives. In fact, these stores seem designed to squeeze money out of foreign boyfriends, relatives, or anyone willing to send a little extra cash to ensure their loved ones don't go hungry. While you may see wealthy neighborhoods in Havana, the vast majority live in much more modest conditions. The economic disparity is huge and affects every aspect of life, from the food on the table to the quality of the buildings people live in. This stark contrast between the haves and have-nots is a defining feature of contemporary Cuban society. Everyday life in Cuba comes with certain precautions, especially when it comes to food and water. While in most places, it's easy to take clean drinking water for granted, things are a little different in Cuba. The treatment of tap water is inconsistent. Some days the water is heavily chlorinated to the point where you can taste the chemicals, and it leaves a heavy feeling in your mouth. Other days, the opposite is true, with the water supply contaminated due to poor infrastructure and water shortages. For Cubans, their stomachs are more resilient, having grown accustomed to less than ideal water quality. But for visitors, drinking tap water can quickly lead to stomach problems or worse. The best way to stay safe is to stick to bottled mineral water, which is widely available in tourist areas, but may be harder to find in more remote locations. Cuban cuisine relies heavily on staples like flour, sugar, and fat, but there is a dark side to it that you should be aware of. In many local paladares, privately owned restaurants or street markets, the same cooking oil is used and reused repeatedly. This not only affects the taste, but also poses a health risk. It's best to stick to reputable restaurants that pay attention to hygiene and food quality. You don't have to splurge on fancy gourmet places or dine at the same table that Obama sat at, but be careful. Even well-known restaurants can have supply issues depending on the country's current economic situation. Transportation in Cuba is more than just getting from point A to point B. It's a journey fraught with challenges and risks. In Cuba, traditional buses and reliable public transport are scarce. Instead, many Cubans rely on old, repurposed trucks for long-distance travel. These vehicles, often loaded with cargo, ferry passengers across the provinces for around $2. These trucks are not safe. They are often old, poorly maintained, and prone to accidents. Cuba's roads add to the danger, with many in poor condition due to lack of maintenance. The private taxi system may seem like a more convenient and safer option, but you need to be careful. Instead, use a state-run taxi or arrange transportation through a trusted locale. You may pay a little more, but that $5 could make the difference between a smooth trip and a dangerous situation. For tourists, renting a car can be an option, but it comes with its own set of challenges. The roads are often poorly marked, and you'll need to be prepared for unexpected obstacles, from potholes to horse-drawn carts. Additionally, gas stations can be few and far between, so it's essential to plan your route carefully. Many people are drawn to Havana for its opportunities, seeking a better life. However, for many internal migrants, life in Havana is not easy. In Cuba, living in Havana as a migrant from another province can feel like living on the edge of the law. Many migrants come to the capital without proper documentation and, as a result, live in a sort of legal limbo. These individuals are often looking for better employment opportunities or simply a way to make a living, but they face discrimination, housing challenges, and legal restrictions. The influx of internal migrants has led to the growth of informal settlements on the outskirts of Havana, where living conditions can be precarious. The government has implemented policies to control internal migration, requiring Cubans to obtain permission to move to Havana. This system, known as the internal passport, has been criticized for restricting freedom of movement within the country. Despite these challenges, many Cubans continue to migrate to the capital, drawn by the promise of better economic opportunities and access to services. For those who want to delve deeper into the darker side of Cuban society, it's important to understand the role of gossip or chisme in Cuban culture. In Cuba, gossip is more than just small talk. It's a way of life. Small, tight-knit communities allow news to travel quickly, and people often seem to keep an eye on their neighbors' every move. Locals often talk about a kind of jealousy that runs deep in Cuban society. The constant scrutiny of neighbors and friends means that privacy is a luxury most people don't have. Your personal information, your relationships, even your work can all be monitored. If you're a foreigner, this culture of gossip can make it difficult to fit in or maintain a low profile. Everyone seems to know what you're doing, whether you want them to or not. This gossip culture serves multiple purposes in Cuban society. On one hand, it's a way of sharing information in a country where official channels of communication are often restricted or unreliable. On the other hand, it can be a form of social control, with the threat of becoming the subject of gossip serving as a deterrent to behavior that deviates from social norms. Cuba's economic situation has had a profound impact on personal relationships, especially romantic ones. Financial hardship has changed the dynamics of dating, often placing material expectations at the forefront. Women facing their own economic hardships may seek relationships that offer financial security. Many Cuban men have noticed this shift, with love becoming less important than financial stability in some relationships. This dynamic has given rise to what some call jineterismo, a form of romantic or sexual relationships between Cubans and foreigners that often involves an exchange of money or goods. While this practice is often associated with prostitution, it's more complex than that, reflecting the economic realities and power dynamics at play in Cuban society. For many young Cubans, relationships with foreigners represent not just a potential source of financial support, but also a possible ticket to a better life abroad. This has led to a complex interplay of emotions, expectations, and cultural misunderstandings in relationships between Cubans and foreigners. When exploring a new country, especially one like Cuba, the curious person quickly realizes how closely the country is tied to tourism. The vibrant streets of old Havana, filled with the echoes of history and the rhythms of salsa, are a testament to this. Cuba's dependence on tourism is both a strength and a weakness. When tourism is strong, businesses both legal and illegal benefit. Licensed vendors sell local handicrafts, food, and souvenirs, while many individuals find other ways to make a living, often engaging in informal or even illegal activities. This reliance on tourism has created a complex economy where Cubans must navigate between official channels and underground markets to survive. The tourism industry in Cuba has led to a dual economy, where those with access to foreign currency through tourism-related jobs or remittances from abroad often fare better than those relying solely on government salaries. This disparity has contributed to social tensions and economic inequality within Cuban society. For tourists, the experience can be both enchanting and unsettling. While they enjoy the beautiful beaches, historic architecture, and vibrant culture, they may also encounter persistent hustlers, known locally as jineteros, who offer various services, from tour guiding to more illicit activities. This interaction between tourists and locals often blurs the lines between genuine hospitality and economic necessity. The Cuban government has attempted to regulate and benefit from tourism while maintaining control over the sector. State-run hotels and tour operators compete with a growing number of private accommodations and services. This has created opportunities for some Cubans to enter the private sector, but it has also led to increased scrutiny and regulation of these businesses. The impact of tourism extends beyond economics. It has influenced Cuban culture, bringing both positive and negative changes. While it has helped preserve historic buildings and traditions, it has also led to the commodification of Cuban culture, with some aspects being performed or exaggerated for tourist consumption. The COVID-19 pandemic dealt a severe blow to Cuba's tourism industry, exposing the vulnerabilities of an economy heavily dependent on foreign visitors. The sudden drop in tourism left many Cubans who relied on this sector struggling to make ends meet, further exacerbating existing economic challenges. As Cuba looks to the future, balancing the benefits of tourism with the need for sustainable development and equitable economic growth remains a significant challenge. The country must navigate the complexities of opening up to more international visitors while addressing the basic needs and aspirations of its citizens. In conclusion, life in Cuba is a study in contrasts and resilience. From the daily struggle for basic necessities to the complex social dynamics shaped by scarcity and tourism, Cubans face unique challenges with remarkable adaptability. The country's rich culture and warm people continue to attract visitors, even as the realities of life on the island remain complex and often difficult. For those watching this documentary, it's important to look beyond the surface and understand the multifaceted nature of Cuban society. Whether you're planning a visit or simply interested in learning more about this fascinating country, remember that Cuba's story is one of perseverance, creativity, and hope in the face of ongoing challenges. As we conclude this journey through Cuba, we invite you to share your thoughts and experiences. Have you visited Cuba? How did your experience compare to what we've discussed? For those who haven't been, has this documentary changed your perception of life in Cuba? Your insights and questions help us create more comprehensive and engaging content. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more in-depth looks at cultures and societies around the world. By hitting that subscribe button, you're not just supporting our work. You're joining a community of curious minds eager to explore and understand our complex world. Thank you for watching, and until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning.